And here's my bottom body tube with my escutcheons and the escutcheon with the dip section here. Now everything is all trimmed and cut proper to size here, and as you can see that it is now mostly snug here in place. It's not going to go anywhere, and that's a very good thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to epoxy these rings here in the tube to this handle section. So what we're going to do is take off this bottom piece here, and the first piece we're going to glue is our escutcheon here with the dip section. So the first thing you want to do is pull up your escutcheon, and in the area right where the escutcheon sits, we're going to put some epoxy in this area. So mix up some perm epoxy and place a bead around where the escutcheon sits, and then replace the escutcheon over on your sitting area. Make sure that your dip sections line up properly, and let the epoxy cure. And here's our escutcheon properly glued into place. Okay, now we're going to glue our bottom body tube here onto our saber handle. Now, if you remember before that we had these poly slip joint washers here that helped us line up our bottom body tube to cut our escutcheons, well, now they're going to be serving as our glue channel here to glue our body tube here to the saber handle. So, what we're going to do is the section where you drilled your number 6 self-tapper, you marked it with an F, this is going to be the back of the body tube here, and this is going to face the back of your saber handle. So you want this hole here to be center with the back of your handle. So how do you do that? Just measure across the back of your handle here and make a mark on there. Once you have your mark, take your body tube here, and you're going to set it back in place, get it on there really well, and make it center. Now once you have this centered here, we're going to inject our epoxy into this hole, and then the glue is going to fill up those channels in between of the poly slip joint washers. Take one of your West system syringes and just cut off the top on here. This top here should fit just inside of the number 6 hole that you drilled out here with your screw. The reason for this now, mix up a batch of regular 5-minute epoxy, pour it into the syringe, and then inject the glue into the hole where the number 6 screw goes. Fill up the chamber as much as you can. If any glue leaks out, stop. Don't worry about the glue leaking. Just wipe off any excess glue and then let the epoxy cure. And here is the bottom of our body tube section here on our saber. Now it's permanently glued into place here, and injecting all the epoxy into this housing here, it did fill it up nicely, and it did add some weight to it. So I'm very happy with this. It did set in nicely, so it's definitely going to be permanent. Now what I had left in my syringe, whatever epoxy I had left in there, I went to my dip section here and I actually filled in this area here. Now it wasn't really completely smooth, but I wanted to put something here so later on I could sand this out and have it smooth when it finally hardens, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Now for my syringe here, I can still reuse it. I just took a 1/16 inch drill bit and I just kind of drilled out the shaft here so I can use this for another epoxy run again. In the dip section escutcheon here, you can see that in between here we have these gaps right up over here. So what you want to do is mix up another batch of 5-minute epoxy, reuse your syringe again, and just kind of fill in these holes over here. Just make a line going all the way around to where the escutcheon meets your body tube, and just run your finger across the epoxy just to kind of smoothen it out. And here is our bottom body section here for our lightsaber. Now the epoxy here has filled in the seams here between this escutcheon and the bottom body tube here very well. There are some high spots here and there, but nothing more than a little sanding can do. So I'm not going to worry about it now. I'll do that later on. Now also, you notice here with my letter F here, this is my forward section, which is going to be facing towards my emitter section when I start working on it. So make sure that this mark here is supposed to be where it's at. Now what I've done also was, where this escutcheon meets the bottom body tube here, I put a bead of epoxy around here and I smooth it out with my finger too. Now even though the seam was very small, I am striving for perfection. So when I spray the saber, it'll look cosmetically good. So now that I have this goal here completed, let's move on to the pommel. To assemble our pommel, get the necessary parts here as followed. your toilet bowl cap, your cut escutcheon, your PVC rings, and your transition ring. Now all these pieces here are facing upwards, so you can see the shiny edge here of your escutcheon and the shiny edge here of your transition ring. Another good way to identify your transition ring here is with the marker still showing on your transition ring. So this will show that this is the up edge on it. Now, take your escutcheon and your transition ring and sand the insides of them with 320 grit sandpaper. And then take your PVC rings and sand this side here and sand this side here with 100 grit sandpaper. Wipe away any dust. And in case if you haven't sanded down your toilet bowl cap, sand this down with 320 grit sandpaper. Now once you have all this sanded here, mix up a batch of permaepoxy and you're going to glue your toilet bowl cap to the inside of your escutcheon. Line it up perfectly and wait till epoxy cures. Now that our epoxy has cured, we're now going to glue the aft end of our pommel to the PVC rings. Now, if you are making a model version of this, which means that this will not have a hole here, what you're going to do is you're going to mix up a regular batch of 5-minute epoxy. You're going to place a liberal amount of epoxy right on the lip here of your escutcheon. Place it all the way around the ring here. Once you have that, take your PVC rings, place it over it, and set this down on a piece of wax paper like so. What the 5-minute epoxy will do is it will drip down onto your PVC ring, henceforth curing, and these two pieces will be one. Other than that, being that I'm making an electronic version, mix up a batch of permaepoxy, and if you can find a stick or something, take the mixture of glue, and you're going to maybe take the glue, put it on the inside here where the plastic meets the metal, which is one way here, or coming from behind. Make sure that you get all of the glue to the inside so you can adhere these two pieces together. And here's how your pommel should start looking like once all the epoxy has cured. Now if you have any epoxy on the outside of your pommel piece here, of your escutcheons or your rings, no, it's fine. Later on we will go back and sand that. But for now, before when I told you to take your permaepoxy, put it at the end of a stick or a metal rod to go through the hole here or through the back of your PVC rings here to glue these two pieces together. Well, I found out that it would not have worked because I would have made a mess on my pommel section. Instead, if you find a metal coat hanger, bend the end like this, put some permaepoxy at the end of it, and just take the glue and force it into the cavity section between your PVC rings and your escutcheon. This way you can push the glue inside the cavity here all the way around your rings up to your escutcheon, and this will give it a nice firm bind, and now these two pieces here will be inseparable. So now that our epoxy has cured here, we can take our transition ring. If you remember, if yours has the marker end like mine does here, this is your outside edge. Take this ring, mix up a batch of permaepoxy, and attach it to the other end of your PVC rings. And with our epoxy fully cured, our pommel section is starting to take shape. Go back to your patterns here and cut out the silver cube placement pattern. Take that pattern and wrap it around your PVC rings. The 2 dots on the end make up 1 dot, and the 5 main dots on the body itself make up the 6 holes that you will have to drill out with a 1/16 inch drill bit. This will give us our placement for our cubes. Now let's go back to our toilet tank overflow tube. The rubber slip joint washer that you made to fit over your toilet tank tube, well, this piece we can now remove. Also, make up one more ring like this and put both of these aside. Cut off approximately 1/4 inch off of your toilet tank overflow tube. And with this cut piece, cut off approximately an 1/8 inch section from this piece. Now what we're doing is we're going to have to glue our overflow tube into our pommel section. Now you can see here when I insert it, there is some play in here, and this we do not want. So what we're going to do first is that we're going to take this cut piece Mix up a small batch of permaepoxy, and we're going to glue it just to the inside. Let epoxy cure. And now that our epoxy has cured for our space filler here, you can now install your push button. I do find that it's easier to install the push button afterwards, because when you're starting to glue everything here together, you don't want to get any of the glue on your wires. And once you get the button installed, I find it best that if you want to use a pair of needle nose pliers to tighten the nut here for your push button. Next, take your toilet tank overflow tube and feed the wires through the tube and then up into your pommel section. Now you can see now that the pommel section here is fairly snug, it's fairly stiff here, so that's very good. What you're going to do now is you are going to take your permaepoxy and make up a bead of epoxy on the inside of your PVC ring here all the way around, and then you're going to glue your toilet tank overflow tube to your PVC rings. Then once you have that done, take one of your cut rubber slip joint washers, place it over your toilet tank overflow tube, and push it up against your PVC rings and glue it right into place. Once your epoxy has cured, permaepoxy your other rubber slip joint washer onto your toilet tank overflow tube. The distance between these two rubber slip joint washers is 1/4 inch from this edge to this edge. Also, keep the seams of your rubber slip joint washers in line here. This will be considered the back of your pommel section.